And the one thing he did rebuke me though, in the sense, which I took
Yeah.
to heart. He said, tell me, about yourself and stuff. And I guess I made the mistake of saying, well, I'm a Canadian country recording artist, and I put records out up in Canada and stuff. And he was just like, whoa. He's like, you're an artist, man. He's like, you're an artist.
Yeah.
Don't put labels or borders on your artistry. He's like, just make music and take it to the world. And I'm like, okay, Brian.
First off, Jason, welcome to Tobin Tonight. So happy to have you. I'm here in Newfoundland. I'm guessing you're in Nashville?
I am. Well, nice to meet you, Tobin.
Yeah. So tell me, how are you handling it in Nashville with COVID? Because listen, I don't have 4 kids. I can imagine having 4 kids can be a little bit hectic, especially during COVID. So let's go into that first. How are you?
I'm doing great. And also, first of all, I just want to say hello and shout out to everybody that might be tuning in Newfoundland. I've been told that there are folks out there who do know my music. Sadly, it's the one place I have not made it out to, and I'm desperately wanting to come and play a show in Newfoundland. I planned on it before this whole crazy shutdown thing, but it's just one of the most beautiful parts of Canada, and I really, really hope to get out there when this all opens back up. But thank you for asking. My family and I, we're doing fine. We're doing fine. I have not had the COVID Rona funk myself. I don't know how I've managed to dodge it. We've been pretty safe, but I'd be lying if I didn't say that, we still got together with some of our neighborhood friends and stuff in a bubble, know. And a lot of them had already had it, and where some of them were put down for about a week, but everybody, nobody ended up in the hospital or anything, thank God. And but we've been spending a lot of time together as a family this year. The kids have been out of school on and off, the whole time. They've been back pretty consistently since August, but we've just been a lot of family quality time. And I guess for me, that's the silver lining in all this, is that we've got to spend a lot of time together, and I've gotten to sort of dive into some songwriting, some different stuff here in my studio, in my home studio, and it's been great.
So again, if you don't mind me asking, because it's 4 kids, what's the age range? Is there a big gap? Are they all pretty close together? Because I can imagine if they're, say, 10 years apart, one could be 10, one could be just say, I don't know, just say 5, 10, 20.
Sure.
I'm not,
Sure. Well, no, I don't mind you asking at all. We do have an age gap of 10 years between our oldest and our youngest. Our oldest is 14 going on 15. Our youngest is 4 going on 15, or going on pretty much. So 4 going on 5. So there's a good age span there. And then we've got, so that's my daughter. And then I've got my son who's 12, another little girl who's 8, and our little guy who's 4 going on 5.
And how do they all kind of interact? Because I guess if it's a normal day, normal kind of school day, it's you come home, they all get their own rhythm, they all get their own okay, personal space, let me do my thing. But now, how does that all work?
Sure. Well, our teenager, as typical teenagers do, that she spends a lot of time in her room, on her phone, on TikTok and stuff, and FaceTiming with her friends and just hanging out and stuff. Our little boy who's 12 going on 13, he's a brain, and so if he's not crushing his homework, he's playing Minecraft is one of the games he likes to play, and he's got his Xbox and stuff like that too, and we throw the ball around the yard, play football and stuff around the yard, and then our 8-year-old, she's our little Dolly Parton. I actually just started giving her guitar lessons yesterday.
Oh, nice.
I finally had one kid come to me and say, I really want to learn guitar. I've been waiting for that. So that makes me really happy. And I was teaching her Miranda Lambert's Bluebird. It's probably one of the easiest songs you can ever learn how to play on guitar. Nice. I think it's really just 3 chords through the whole song. And so she learned her first 2 of 3 chords yesterday. And so I guess that'll keep her busy for a while.
Wait until she sees all the guitars that are in the back, and then she asks, "Dad, can I grab one of those?" And then it's the moment of like,
Yeah.
these are my babies. Like I know you're
Well,
mine, but these are mine. So what do we do?
well, for luck, she's got. I have a little Martin guitar that I
Okay.
bought off of a songwriter buddy of mine who was getting rid of it, and it's perfect. When he said he was looking to get rid of it, I scooped it up because it's a really good quality. Because it's a Martin, it's a really good quality little guitar. For a lot of songwriters, it's a perfect size travel guitar. Just something you can, bring onto an airplane real easy or whatever. And a lot of guys travel down to the Key West songwriters retreat with those little travel guitars. But it's perfect for little kids for their small hands and stuff. Yeah.
I do find it interesting because again, like of course you're known for country music and also like singing it, songwriting as well. But like when you have, say, the little one now that's kind of in guitar, like you're showing the interest of being like when she comes to you with certain songs or maybe certain, I guess, music that she listens to, is it kind of interesting to you to be like, oh, okay, like this is the type of music that you listen to? Because when you said Miranda Lambert, like imagine one day if you stumbled across like working with an act that she is listening to, and you can then tell her like, hey, like I know Tebe, like I know this person, and
Yeah,
then
yeah.
they're like, really,
fact,
you know them?
She took it upon herself to learn. There was a Megan Patrick song that she loved, and that is cool because I know Megan, and we've written songs together, and been on award shows together and stuff. So that was really cool because I was like, hey, my daughter's learning one of your songs. That was really cool, and then like at one point was dressing like her and everything, had the frilly boots and the whole thing, so that was pretty cool. But yeah, it's my teenager, she's into more of the pop stuff, and but they kind of like they like a bunch of different things. They a lot of the girls love Miranda Lambert, and then whichever Canadian country female star that they meet, they usually love as well. So it's cool. It's cool to see them. I don't know. It's early yet for a lot of them to too early to tell if they're actually going to want to do this, pursue it as a career or anything like that. But of course they'll have my support with whatever they want to do. But it's just fun. I'm all about if kids want to learn to play guitar, I'm all about that, because for me, learning to play guitar was a ticket to travel the world. I mean, the ticket to travel all over Canada, play thousands of, or at least hundreds, I don't know, maybe it is thousands, but hundreds of shows over the years, and, play certainly thousands of miles, and meet so many great people, so many great friendships, and then ultimately led to our move to Nashville right here. So, and some more great relationships and friendships to work in this wonderful industry. So, that was, just learning an instrument. That was my ticket to a whole future. So I'm all about it. If any of them want to learn, I'm all about showing them.
I like, though, that it's interesting because, like, again, when you're mentioning that they're young and she's just getting into it, she could pursue it, she might not, but it's still somewhat interesting to me because I can imagine someone that, just say, has a full passion for it, and then as they get older, because maybe right now it's not sinking in, but as they get older, like, oh my God, I can't believe like my dad was able to even like FaceTime this person for me, and I got to ask them questions. Like, can you imagine if someone like myself that does podcasting, someone's like, oh yeah, I can get Conan O'Brien on the phone for you. What do you want? What did you want to know? And I'm just like, and then like in your mind, you're just like, oh yeah, of course my dad knows Conan. That's great. But when you think about it later, you're like, oh my God, how lucky was I that was able to be set up for me, kind of thing. Because you do see some second generational acts that come along. Like, I look at, for the example, and sometimes it's nice that you don't know their parents until someone tells you, like Ellie King. I was very surprised to find out who her father was, and not even in the same career, but I'm like, good for you. You're creating your own path, but still mind blowing to me.
Yeah. That's, I mean, it is pretty cool. Right now, they're just, what's really cool for me is just to watch them sort of discover themselves, finding their own way, develop their personalities are developing, and to watch them find their own path. And if any one of them, wants to pursue music, I mean, for sure, they're right here in the right place to do it in Nashville. and they sure don't have to do a move like I did from
Yeah.
small town Pembroke, Ontario, and move 1,000 miles to a new country.
Yeah.
So they'll already be starting to head on that front. But what's crazy to me is like Nashville was this mystical, magical, legendary place. Nashville, to them, it's just home.
Yeah.
It's not. It doesn't have the same shine. They're not aware like for me coming from small town Ontario, it was just like Nashville. I grew up watching the Grand Ole Opry and all this stuff, and never even been here. But they've been into town. We've been to multiple events over the years in town, and they know it as the city with the Batman building. I think it's the AT&T building right now, but everybody in town, the locals call it the Batman building because it sort of looks like this.
Yeah. It's interesting because I guess the Canadian example would be like if you grew up just say in Toronto, from in the Newfoundland perspective anyway, like if you grew up in Toronto, it's like the mecca of sports, the mecca of everything. Like you're just like, yeah, I can go to TSN, I can go down the street and talk to James Duthie anytime I want. And you're like, yeah, I don't get to do that. Like, so I grew up watching the tourism commercials in Ontario and thinking when I was smaller, all this was in one place, like the Parliament building, Marineland. And when I got older, I was like, you lied to me. Like, this is other places. We're in Newfoundland. And like, even the ending of it, it's like OntarioTourism.ca. I'm like, okay, you're in my mind as you get older, like the psychology is like, it's a really big place. You're not going to contact one person. Newfoundland's like, do you want to see 5 people in like Lanza Meadow? Call Samantha. And it's like, oh, come on. Can we do a little bit better? Can we at least advertise it? And then it's like, we're the farthest place from Disneyland. I'm like, okay, who is this geared towards? Kids don't want to hear that. But to each their own. But I love that your reference there because, when they're growing up, they just see it as Nashville. But as they get older, maybe they learn to maybe appreciate it a bit more. Not that saying they don't, but they it's like anything. Like I moved away from Newfoundland to go to school. And I always took for granted the whole fiddle music, Celtic music, going like house parties, going like, that happens everywhere. And then when you get to Ontario, you walk into someone's house, they're like, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, right, I'm not in Newfoundland. This is not normal. Sorry. In Newfoundland,
is that really a thing in Newfoundland? People just like kind of walk into people's houses?
Yeah, like we have a neighbor it's my dad knows him, but we live next to his daughter, and he knows my dad very well. And he will just like, he'll maybe make a knock, just let you know, like I'm coming. And then he just walks in. Hey, how's it going? But no one bats an eye. No one's like, holy God, like, how dare you just walk in? It could be like someone you've never seen in like 3 weeks. And they're just like, that's awesome. Hey, everybody, what are you doing? They're like, oh, hey, John. Hey, Jack. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah. Well, I've always heard that about Newfoundland. And I definitely love like it's so steeped in, Celtic culture, really, right?
Yeah.
Like whether it's Irish or Scottish, that whole, it's so authentic. All of that music is just amazing, and of course, I think safe to say Alan Doyle sort of really popularized it, across Canada, and wears it proudly and represents really, really well. I imagine, but he's always talking about the good old kitchen party. And,
Well, I mean, the perfect example that I give you with that, because Alan Doyle is a good example. It's just like we love Alan Doyle here in the East Coast, but like he's teamed up with Dean Brody on a few occasions for songs, and like Dean Brody has been happy to come on the podcast as well, and he's just over the moon of like, like I think I'm one of the songs that's like it's Friday or Friday. Right. Like he was like, Alan Doyle just seen a wedding happen and was like, we're gonna go over and crash that wedding. He's like, you can't do that. It's like they invited us over. They know who we are. It's not like it's like top celebrity. It's just like, hey, it's Newfoundland. You're here and we're having a wedding. Yeah, we've got room. Like, come over and party.
I love that.
Dean was like, you can't do that.
Like I said, I would really, really love to get out there. And it pains me that, it pains me that I haven't made it out there yet. It's always been, usually a logistical challenge. It's usually, especially in the early days of my career, it was like the definite money losing show to fly a whole band out there and everything. But I would gladly nowadays I'm a little further along. I'd gladly lose a little bit of money to come out.
Yeah. Well, I always look at it from the perspective of when you're younger, and like, so the one example that I loved, and it just kind of was peak just bad PR all around. Now, not her fault, but it was like Hillary Duff was supposed to come here at one point when it was like big Lizzie McGuire. And then the press came out and was like, she thought she was going to New Zealand. I'm like, number one,
oh wow,
you don't have to say that because now you're making her look bad. You made the press look bad.
right?
But it was like, why? Like, I get it. You could have just said, oh, sorry, she's not coming right now. Maybe in the future. But we've had acts come at the end of their kind of tour. Like Reba would come here, Vince Gill. I love Vince Gill, but like to see them come, and Vince Gill is always entertaining. Like it's just not the music side. I think it's underrated that he made the opening joke that again, it's to each their own. Some people might be like, that's a little really, really old country. But he made the joke. He's like, yeah, last time we were here was like in 1980 something. And he's like, the fog never lifted. We just landed from being up there in the sky that long. And the crowd was like, oh, he gets it, our humor, because we're so foggy. And I was like, at least he knows a little bit of the joke aspect as well. So
yeah.
But to go off of what you were saying, like I kind of think I got interested in your music when I was a little bit younger. And again, like you said, the Newfoundland stations were playing it all the time to the point where, and now that I have you, I've always said to people, if I ever have acts on and I'm telling them about their music, it was like overplayed. It was
really,
it was
and where was that? Like what part of Newfoundland? Because I want to know where I should come.
Yeah.
There's a place I should come and do a show. Where would that be in Newfoundland?
You'd have to go dead center St. John's. You'd have to go to the Malwyn Center. You know, people would come from say Gander, like Witless Bay, Goulds, because it's the Mecca pretty much in here where everyone comes to perform. But I like how on the radio the first few times you're up at your cabin or your cottage and you're having a relaxing day, and then you hear like, so I've got it written down because I knew I was going to forget it, but like on a night like this, feels like that. And I still listen to them to this day because they're kind of timeless, but sometimes I look back and be like, holy, like that was released a while ago. But at the time, at the time I was like, oh, this is great music. This is good. This is what I want to listen to. It's like Sunday memories for me kind of thing. But at the same time, I like listening to it on my own time. Then the radio would be like, here's another Jason Blaine song. I'm like, no, stop.
That's incredible. That's really that makes me really happy to hear that. Even if they wore it out a little bit, because it's happy to be played anywhere. But but especially it's the folks get to know you from. That's how they get to know you is through your music, and you really do have to be played a lot. For anything to really resonate, with people. Just a couple spins here and there won't cut it. But the fact that you can put me together with that song that you like or whatever, that gives me hope to that we can come there and do a show and people might show up.
Yeah, well, I mean, listen, I got a niece and nephew that like they listen to say I Heart 2000s, like even it's like I Heart 2000s country, and every now and again just to put it in the mix, I will change the I Heart 2000s to like my playlist, and then they'll listen to a song and they'll be like, who's this by? I'm like, oh, I'm glad you like it because this is Canadian. I want you to appreciate Canadian content as well. But I like how when you're mentioning, of course, your journey, like I'm assuring that in your own hometown that, they play that music constantly. So it's easy to kind of get established in your hometown. But then when you go hear it in Toronto, hear it in Ottawa, hear it in the States, like then you're like, okay, I'm starting to gain traction. It's like a podcast. You want to be big in your own town, but when I go to my metrics, it's like, hey, did you know that you're big in India? I'm like, great. Like I didn't know I was big in India. It's like that's cool.
Well, but it's very cool to see that. I love that. I love seeing the analytics on the streaming platforms on Apple or Spotify or whatever. Especially with one of my sort of recent viral hits, I guess. This song wasn't a big radio hit. It was a disappointment for me at radio. It didn't didn't chart nearly as high as I had hoped it would, and that's the song "Dance with My Daughter." But fans don't really know that because it has the most views out of all my videos on YouTube. It's got over 3.5 million views or something like that. It's up to, which is a really a lot for for a Canadian domestic artist, and but just millions of streams, and it's still my most Shazam song. But what's really cool is to see week after week, it's still my most streamed song. And then you go and you see like where it's streamed, and it's just like Dallas, Texas, or you know, Santa Monica, California, and all these like random places, like a lot, like, you know, especially in Dallas, it streamed a lot, and then I would have people sending me video clips from a wedding, and they used my song to dance to with their father at their wedding, and then send me a little clip from one from Vegas, one from Dallas, another one from somewhere else in California. And that's really cool to me. It's really cool to have those and to go, well, you know, maybe we need to go see those folks sometime.
Yeah, look, it's interesting because sometimes when you grow up, you're listening to certain songs. Like I know TikTok, as much as I don't like it, there are things that you're happy when it's trending. Like I know I grew up listening to Simple Plan. Like I was one of those kids that loved kind of punk rock, but like to see the song of I'm Just a Kid, and that's trending on TikTok when they do like, you know, you and your brother, you and your sister, you and your dad, whatever, as a kid, and then do the same stance when you get older. I'm like, okay, so now if you've never heard of Simple Plan, which I don't know where you've been, but just say you haven't, you're starting to be like, oh my God, this song is trending on TikTok. Like, how old is this? Oh, then to them, it's not even like how old it is. It's just like, I like it. There are songs that I'll go back on iTunes, download it, and then not realize that it's from 2018.
Oh, and yeah.
You're just like, I don't care. Like I found it now. So here you go. Here's the $1.29 that you want here for the song. But it's so cool to me because like you were saying, finding out where it peaks, where people listen to it. Like I think today a lot of artists find their platform that way. Now it's good and bad because you had Vine before there was TikTok where you get Shawn Mendes. Right now, if we're talking kind of country and a rising star, Robin Ottolini with F-150. We get that's radio plays, but TikTok made that kind of big when people were like, you know,
absolutely. And I'm, you know, I was slow to the Instagram party. I mean, I was slow to all the parties, honestly. But and I'm slow to TikTok. But I just joined a couple weeks ago. I just got on there
I seen that
after at least a year of, you know, friends of mine, especially the girls, you know, just going like, hey, you need to get on TikTok. People are, you know, but I always really thought about it like, you know, like goofy dances and stuff, you know, like, and I was like, man, I don't think my music really lends itself to that, and I sure don't want to get on TikTok and just, you know, twerk or something. So, nobody wants to see that. So I honestly, I'm still navigating it, you know, jump into, you know, change your clothes or something goofy. I'm still trying to find ways that it, you know, to make it, to do things that I want to do.
Geared towards your audience per se.
Exactly. And not just the, you know, just like the goofy stuff, you know, which is fun, but you know, it just, you know, I turned 40 this year, so it just makes me feel pretty silly to, you know, get on there and just start doing senseless stuff. But if there's a way that I can get on there and really, you know, reach new fans, play, you know, showcase the music, shine a spotlight on the songs, and even the past songs I've done, then you know, I'm all about it, man. I'm all about reaching fans and staying connected with the ones that I have, especially this year. However I can, you know, reach the people, you know, I'm all about it.
No, I'm on that same fence with you with TikTok because people will send me. I have a person that sends me a message going, "Well, geez, your podcast clips would do well on TikTok," and I'm like, "Yeah, but you got to understand that I'm not gearing it towards like say 12 or 13-year-olds who are going to comment like this is too long." I'm like, "It's a 30-second clip. What are you saying?"
Right.
But they're like, "Yeah, but there's so much more than just dance videos." I'm like, "Oh, well, it's not coming up for me because when I go on my Instagram and see the TikToks, it's like, you know, hockey jocks complaining about playing hockey or lip syncers or like people that take someone else's TikTok and redo it and then somehow get more followers." And I'm just like, that's not what I want. I don't want someone to mimic me or somehow take one of my interviews and be like, cut me out and then make the guest look stupid just for them to get more views. It's like, see, I just gained so many because I made your interview. And I'm like, that's not what I want. What are you doing?
No, it's great, man. And I appreciate the invite to come on to your podcast or vodcast as they call it too. You know, any chance that you have a platform that you're not limited by, like you said, like 30-second clips or something like that, so you can actually dive into talking about the music and talking about, you know, your career or whatever, and just really giving the fans an opportunity to get to maybe know you better or learn something that they didn't know before. I think it's great, man. I love that you're interested in country music. I mean,
Yeah.
When I was growing up, and you mentioned Vince Gill earlier, I was and remain a huge Vince Gill fan, and I would tune into anything that for a chance to hear him talk about, how he got started or who he played with and toured with and what he's working on. I love all that stuff, and so it's a great, I happy to talk about whatever's on your mind to pick my brain about.
I'm happy you said that because I just grabbed my phone and I'm just going to go like, Dear Vince Gill, Jason Blaine actually wants you on my podcast, and I think it'd be a really good interview. And then he'll come back and be like, sure, but who are you? I'd be like, that's fair. But to get into it, because I know when you were saying, like, of course, with these platforms, you get a chance to ask people questions that maybe people don't know about you. You just mentioned about turning 40. How is that hitting you? Are you like happy to turn 40? Are you excited? Are you nervous?
Well, I didn't think it would come around so fast. I still feel 25. I feel like a George Strait lick. I still feel 25 most of the time, from Troubadour. That's the way I feel. And, I still go like, wow, I have 4 kids. I'm 40. Like, when did this happen? But, it's great because I still feel really young, and I honestly feel like I'm probably at the best place in terms of ability, in terms of being able to express what I want to express on guitar. And I feel like I know my voice better than I ever have in my career, where I can get on a microphone and sing and sound like me and not try too hard to have to do that and deliver what I'm hearing in my mind, bridging that gap between what you want to do and what you can physically do. Of course, I'm no Celine Dion or so I've never been an insanely gifted vocal acrobatist, but in terms of being my authentic character and singing and bringing one of my songs to life in the studio, I'm probably better now at 40 than I was when I was 25, no doubt about it. And but now it's like, I heard one of my other heroes, even though we're kind of close to the same age, but I've gotten into John Mayer music in the past 10 years. And I heard him say, people don't really dream past their third record.
Oh, really? That's
interesting. And I thought that's a really interesting statement. I thought that's really true because, when you're dreaming about making your first record, you're like, well, I'm going to do this kind of song and this kind of song. And then you're hyped up to do your second record or your third. And you're like, I'm going to do this. And I haven't covered this. But after you've done, I'm on the record number 7. And, it's like, after you've done that, you've kind of run the gamut in terms of themes, at least maybe even a couple times in country music. And so, and you don't want to, and I've already sung songs about, my kids and my family and things like that. And I just don't think that people want to hear that all the time. I was like, I've got a Dance with My Daughter song. I don't need 5 of those.
Dance with My Daughter, part 2, part 4, part 5. Like, I'm sick and tired of dancing with you. Can we move on? You're and then you want to explore some like more mature themes and stuff and sing sort of, I don't know, not age appropriate songs, but there's just a maturity to the content. I'm also not a 20-year-old frat boy, and I don't want to sing that kind of stuff anyway. So, but I'm cool with it. 30s were awesome. 30s were better than my 20s. I had a blast through. My 30s was like, things were really, really working and a great place career wise and family and marriage and life and everything. But to the point of not dreaming past your third record, it's like, okay, but now I'm 40. I'm going like, okay, what are the next? How do I survive? How do I even be relevant or stay or do music for the next 20 years? Yeah. Because I really don't have a plan. I never really planned past 40. It's interesting to me because I want to dive into a whole bunch of topics on that one, because when you mentioned John Mayer, like a lot of younger acts that we've had on in the pop kind of scene have mentioned John Mayer as an act they grew up listening to. And I don't know why it surprises me, but there was a time like Your Body is a Wonderland. I don't know how he feels about that. Like, to me, he shouldn't be ashamed of it. I know he's a little bit more like, that was a pop song, I'm not really into it, but I'm like, I'm okay with it. Like, I like all your new songs as well, but he's one of those acts that I feel like at a time people were like, oh, he's so dull, he's so boring. But then when you get older, you're kind of like, you go back and listen to it and you're like, maybe I just wasn't really appreciating the song. Like, like slow this train down or stop this train.
Stop this train, yeah.
Yeah. And when I was younger, I had a friend in Carlton that loved John Mayer, loved all this stuff. And I was like, it's not your body is a wonderland. I don't care. But then as I got older, I was like, man, I should phone that guy up, get him to slap me in the face because I like these songs now. It takes its time on you sometimes to like grow to like them. Like,
well, he's done it. He's done it brilliantly and really on his own terms. It's really, I get mad respect for the way that he approached his career. He's never felt like he started like I'm the body is a wonderland guy, and that now there's an expectation of me to remain that guy for the fan base that I've amassed here with one song or something like that, or Daughters in those early days, or even Neon, that whole first record, or so he's always just been like, well, I'm gonna just do the kind of record I feel like this year, like, which is amazing because I was not into that stuff back then. I wasn't, a screaming 17-year-old girl or something like that.
I was.
I did not. I fangirl him now.
Yeah.
But I was not into that stuff. It wasn't until like Continuum where I'm like, oh, this guy plays mad guitar. Yeah. Like mad blues guitar. Like as good or better than any or most. So I was into that. And then when he went a little more country, well, I was all about it with the Born and Raised in Paradise Valley records that sounded in a lot of ways more country than a lot of things that were on country radio at the time. So I was really into that stuff because it really brought a lot of those melodies together with great bluesy playing and stuff. And I've actually been working on a side project here for my own amusement during this whole COVID. I've been writing, and I just came from the studio today, finishing mixes up on the first of the 4 first things that I've cut that are along those lines, that are kind of they're Americana, rootsy, bluesy country, something like that, because that's the kind I love. That I love doing the mainstream thing, and I've been very lucky to do that for a long time, and will continue to do that. But I know that this thing that I did, I don't expect mainstream country radio to play it, but I really wanted to record some of this stuff because I love writing this kind of stuff. I love playing guitar over it. So, and because that's who I feel like I am now at the age that I am now. I'm not the same as person I was when I was 25. And so taking sort of a cue from, guys like John Mayer who go like, well, you don't have to feel like you need to make the music that you made when you were the person that you were back then. You can go ahead and give yourself permission to make something that reflects who you think you are right now, and whatever that is.
It's growth. And I like how, because I look at it from just say for us two, it's like we kind of have the appreciation for John Mayer, and there is a younger generation out there that still might have that too, but I kind of look at their perspective of like, okay, who are their stars? Like when I go to country music per se, I grew up with, say, Shania, Garth Brooks, Tim McGraw, and to see people now say, well, someone maybe 10 years younger than me might say, well, I grew up with Carrie Underwood, Taylor Swift, to an extent, like they might even put in like Kelly Clarkson, depending on what it is. And then now you have another generation that says, well, Carrie Underwood was my idol, but here's who I really listen to. And I was like, It's interesting because I look at it in this terms of John Mayer to us might be an Ed Sheeran to someone, because Ed Sheeran kind of was like the same aspect where it's like, I'm going to write this song. If you like it, great. If you don't, it's not going to stop me from writing it. I'm going to just continue on. And their stories are pretty similar, because I remember Ed Sheeran's was saying that he was singing in the UK just outside of stores before he became famous.
Stuff. And that's where he got all his, his playing, accompanying himself, right? So like, using a loop pedal and just kind of started the whole. I mean, I feel like he really pioneered the whole looper, like the looper artist, and I see it all the time around Nashville, like a solo act, and they're doing the Ed Sheeran thing. They're sort of beatboxing into the microphone, scratching a loop with their strings and a beat on the guitar, and then singing harmonies and stacking it. And halfway through the song, I mean, you sound like a dang band, and it's awesome.
Yeah.
And so, you know, in the case of like, you know, my heroes, like I mentioned, like John Mayer and stuff, and even like today, like it's really cool for me to see guys like Chris Stapleton really blow up doing a more old school throwback thing, and a whole generation of young people go like, oh, I love this, this is amazing, and this is the coolest thing ever. And really it's like it's very old stuff done very authentically, super well, because you know Chris grew up with all that stuff and he comes by all of it honestly. And I feel like and then it's sort of forced radio to embrace it again too, where a lot of people would not have got away with the sonic picture of like what he was doing. And maybe they wouldn't even do it if it was anybody but Chris, perhaps. But
Yeah.
But it's sort of, it's cool for me. All that to say, it's really cool because it's gonna birth another generation of people carrying on those things that are rooted in tradition, whether it's blues or traditional country and stuff. And I think that's really important because I love those traditional elements. I think that's what makes all the new stuff sound great.
Yeah. Now, the one thing before we head into another topic here, like that I want to mention because of the John Mayer fact is, with John Mayer, one of the things I love about John Mayer that ties into my love of Conan was there was one time that Conan was late for a plane and he was getting ready to go, I guess, to do his late night show. This was a John Mayer that no one knew, just the same as a kid on the street.
Wow.
And he said, John Mayer asked him for an autograph and he was like, sure, I got the time. He's like, I'm kind of in a rush, but sure. And he like chatted with him like for a couple minutes, gave him an autograph. And I think John either played a song or he seemed that he had the guitar and he was like, you're going to make it big one day. And I'm like, okay, so he had to play something for you to say that. And you're already late, but you took the time. And here it is. He's John Mayer now. So I feel like the quote
That's cool.
I believe, yeah, like I believe the quote he said at one point, and it's the same with Dave Chappelle, is anytime they call him up to say, we need you for something, he's like, don't even have to ask. Like, you gave me the time. So, and I think that's kind of interesting when you get those stories, like whether it be, I'm a big wrestling fan, so I see it a lot in wrestling,
Oh, really?
but in a lot of stuff, it's kind of like, you know, if they took the time to talk to you, in your mind, you might think it's just a fan, like who gives a shit? And years later, it could turn out to be like your opponent or someone that opens the act for you, or you're opening for them when you're on your last leg. So it's kind of interesting. It goes full circle. Like,
oh yeah,
I see Shania all the time, like with different acts, whether it's a pop singer that she's like, oh, I don't know who she is, but she could be famous, or a Kelsey Ballerini that she'll team up with on things. And I'm like, good for Shania, because in years later when she could be like, geez, I don't know who Shania is, like, because there's going to be a generation that's going to lose the whole aspect. But if she keeps relevant with this crowd, then it's like, oh yeah, I remember that girl that was with Kelsey Ballerini. What's her name? I'm like, that's Shania Twain. And they're like, I'm sorry, I didn't know. I'm like, no, it's okay. It's just that I'm glad that it's still somewhat relevant in your mind that it's the lady to you.
Oh yeah. And you know what? I've been really lucky in that meeting my heroes. Everybody that I've met, a lot, you know, there's that old saying that I've heard people say, like, don't ever meet your heroes because you're disappointed. But that hasn't been my experience. You know, I met Vince several times and he was really gracious to me. I met Bryan Adams here in town.
Oh wow!
At his show, we got sort of invited to the little VIP hang after, and my wife was actually, she was pregnant at the time with our youngest, and he was super great. He was all about that. He loves kids, and he was all about talking about that. And he was asking me about my career and everything. And the one thing he did rebuke me though, in the sense, you know, which I took to heart. He said, tell me, about yourself and stuff. And I guess I made the mistake of saying, I'm Canadian country recording artist, and I put records out up in Canada and stuff. And he was just like, whoa. He's like, you're an artist, man. He's like, you're an artist.
Yeah.
Don't put labels or borders on your artistry. He's like, just make music and take it to the world. And I'm like, okay, Brian. Okay.
If he tells you,
do country. You want to do a rock song, do a rock song. You want to do blues song, do a blues song. He's like, it's a big world, man. And he would know because he tours the world. But it really did. I'm like, well, yeah, why do I say that? I am a Canadian country recording artist, but that really, I'm like, why would I put a border on a label around that? And so I'm proud to be that and do that. But But and like I was talking about with this little side project of, I don't know what you would call it, Americana or roots music that I'm working on. I'm not putting any label on it. I don't know. People can say what they think it is. When they hear it, is it country? Does it have some blues elements to it? What is it? I don't know. And I'm just really letting it go because I think that that's been the cool thing about streaming, and I think that the streaming thing has really brought the borders down. It used to be like, if you weren't on American radio, then Americans didn't hear you. And you have to be on current American radio, and that's not the case anymore. It's just like anybody. I get messages from all over. Hey, I really like your music, and it's from Alabama or something. Like, how did you hear it? Spotify or Apple or satellite, and that's so great, and or like you said, maybe somebody in New Zealand or something. And so
some of our acts on, to be fair, like some people, like they'll, of course, with PR, they'll send you a press release, like, because they're looking to try to expand their horizons too. So it's like we had a girl named Chloe Caroline on, and I'm sure, and I don't want to like dismiss her, but I'm sure there's like none song played in Newfoundland from Chloe Caroline, maybe not even in Ontario. But when I hear it and I follow her on Instagram, like, got a new song out now, and then I was like, this should be played because it's not much different than what you're listening to anyway. Sure. And there's bands in LA that are like pop punk that don't even played in LA per se. And it's like, geez, I'm glad more people outside the realm can hear you, because if you're only labeled in one spot, you're never going to grow. But it takes that time to get an audience to grow. And then if you get enough people like, hey, there's 20,000 people in Newfoundland who know who you are, maybe tell your PR people to come to Newfoundland. You might start to develop, right? So that's how it all comes together. But I like how when you were mentioning about projects that you do, like it's I guess it's a little bit more common now than it used to be, but like being a singer and a songwriter, because the one that I really looked up to, and maybe you know him, maybe you don't, but I loved Wave when I was younger, like the song California by Wave. And I reached out to the guy and I was like, do you want to come on? But some of them are really good at making sure that they stay in a lane, or they don't want to be like, go all the way back. Cause he was like, actually what I do now is, he's like, I'm a songwriter. And I looked at people that he wrote for it. I'm like, that's great. But I felt like I understood where he was coming from. By coming on my podcast to talk Wave, it's almost like I'm going back and I don't want to go back. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. But just letting you know, I love Gin Wave and I love that song.
Well, I'll give him a kick in the ass for you and send him your way. I know Dave really well. And his nickname is Dwave. And we worked together. I did a record with him with my single Born to Love. And Boy with the Guitar, that was the name of the EP. And we did a record together and had a great time, and have since written a bunch of songs together. We had a single that we wrote together on a duo, and who's now a trio called Petrick, and they had a hit last year across Canada with it. And Dave, or AKA Dwave, is a great talent, great vocalist, great producer. And that song actually just went gold again. I don't know if you know that, but Eric Etheridge, country artist Eric Etheridge, is also a pal of mine. Yeah,
we've had him on.
Yeah. Did you have him on?
Yeah, him and Kelsey.
Great. Lovely people. I love both of them. Well, he did a version of Going to California, and it just went gold. So for the second time in 20 years, which is really cool. So, I mean, Dave should come on to your show and talk about it.
I don't want to do shit or anything with him, but it's funny because like when we reached out, I was like, I'm sure he'd be like super thrilled to come on and be like surprised that it's still people listen to it. But I understood where he was coming from. But a big reason that it kind of now I think it's like one of my ringtones. I just love it. But if you told him that, he'd be like, oh, come on, grow up, like stop it. But when Eric played it, I said to Eric, I'm like, I like your version, but no offense, I always like the originals. Like it's like the song now.
The original is always the one that there's a nostalgia about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's like the one that they have out now. Like I believe I'm a big fan of Matchbox 20, but I love the song on Well. Now Steve Aoki and like Wiz Khalifa, and I think it's Kara, did a remix of it. And I like that too, but it's always a little bit to my defense. It's almost like younger generation came up and like, love this song. I'm like, but you know where they're sampling it from. They're like, no, this is the original. I'm like, no. Like, no. And if they don't like the original, I'm like, that's fine, but don't don't get in my face about the original because
well, a lot of the times, even subconsciously, those originals are tied to memories too. That even if we don't even recognize it, we know you just feel it. You know where you were when that song was out in the year that it was out. You were at a party somewhere. You were making out with some girl somewhere, and that song was playing in the background. And
I was probably 10, and I just liked the song. And then when I got older, I got older, and it was depression that used to come to you. I'm like, oh, okay, I get where he's coming from. But like, to me, I just like a lot of stuff that they do. But like 3 a.m. to me was just a song about 3 a.m. until I watched a recent performance, and he talks about how I think it was like his mother was going through cancer. I'm like, wouldn't pick it up in the song, but now it has a deeper meaning. So I'm like, now I like it a bit more. But yeah, it's interesting to me with certain songs. Like I know when I listen to yours, like everyone takes a different meaning away from a song. Like Feels Like This, instantly I go back to being like maybe 20, hang out with new friends at a cottage. And I'm not a big drinker. I don't drink, but them having a few beers and then like just going down memory lane. I'm like, that's good enough for me. But I feel like when I listen to it now and you're not really close with those people, I'm like, damn it, Jason Blaine. Like, why did you have to come on at this point? Like, give me like 2 or 3 minutes so I can digest this, then come on.
Right. Well, it's the thing, man. Songs take us to a time and place, and they're usually tied to those memories, and hopefully good ones. But sometimes they help us, remember, help us heal, help us forget.
The other funny thing I want to mention, hopefully you don't take this the wrong way, but I do think it's kind of interesting because when I mentioned to a few people that I was going to have you on the podcast. Now, of course, some of them are like, who's Jason Blaine? Some of them are like, oh, I love this song. I'm like, okay, each their own, whatever. But two of them, which I thought was hilarious, and they're my age, so I kind of gave them shit afterwards, was like, that guy kind of looks like Phil Kessel and Luke Bryan combined. I'm like, I'm so glad that like Phil Kessel does not play for Nashville because I'm sure a lot of people are like, Phil, so I love you. And you'd be like, I'm not Phil. Or like, do you ever get that? Do people ever come up to you and tell you like you look like this guy or Luke Bryan, like Phil or Luke?
Well, it's funny, but I have my younger brother bears a lot of resemblance to Luke Bryan. He's got bigger teeth than me, so he's always smiling. He's a happy guy, so and we look a little bit alike. But I always think that my younger brother looks just like Luke Bryan when you put him in some glasses and a Bass Pro cap or something like that. It's like, gosh, but no, I mean, the Phil Kessel thing, I've never got that, but I guess it depends on the length of my hair or something too.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what it is. It's because it has the curl in the back and you have the beard going, so it's like it looks like peak Phil. But I'm sure, like, I don't know if because they're always wearing hockey gear, but I don't know if Kessel has tattoos. But I'm sure someone would still, because it's Nashville, and I'm not butting Nashville, but it's not Canada. Canada market knows their hockey. Where someone's that guy's Phil Kessel, and I feel like you should go along with it and be like, to Dave, Phil. And then someone's like, that's not Phil Kessel. And then they're like, you mother. And you're like, hey, man, I'm Jason Blaine, though. I'm still somewhat famous here.
That's funny, man. That's funny.
But to get into a little bit about your music side, because I know we're going all over the map, which I like in interviews. But tell me kind of how you come from the place of Pembroke to getting to Nashville, because I'm sure there's a lot of artists out there. And I'll name a few names, even though I don't want to speak for them, but just say like a Robin Ottolini or someone that's just coming up that they might listen to this and they might go back in time and go like, oh, it's cool. Like, because I came from a small town in Ontario that's not a Toronto or an Ottawa or a Kingston. And now people know me, but it still does take time. So take me through that process.
Oh, gosh. I mean, how long is your podcast?
It's like, you continue to talk. I'll get a pillow, and then like you come back, and then they're like, no, go for it.
Well, I mean, the short story is that I all the records that I listened to growing up, whether it was Garth or Vince or Alan Jackson or Travis Tritt or Brooks and Dunn, a lot of those '90s guys. I mean, often I would see like recorded at Soundstage Studios Nashville or Ocean Way Studios Nashville, Tennessee, and all the credits and stuff, and it was just always, and I grew up, watching. In those days, it was called TNN, the National Network, and had carried the Grand Ole Opry and Primetime Country with either Gary Chapman or there was the Kirk and Chase show. And my mom loved country music, still does, and so anytime all that stuff was on, she was watching it and I was watching it with her. My dad played in the band. So there was this whole, I knew that I loved the music and I knew that that's where it came from. It came from the South, you know, it came from the hills of Tennessee and Southern, you know, down here somewhere in the South. So
came from
I just knew that
roads.
I always wanted to move down here and be a part of where it happened and be a part of the community. So I lived for 5 years after I moved away from Pembroke. I lived for 5 years in Ontario in Kitchener-Waterloo.
Okay.
And that's where I made some of my lifelong friendships there with Jason Barry, who produced my first record and did a great job. And we became lifelong friends, played in my band for years, now plays with Dean Brody. He's been with Dean for, I guess, probably 10 years.
Yeah.
And Shane Gousset and I became, you know, really great friends. And he played my band, you know, almost the whole time when he could. Both those guys have been on hit songs of mine, including the CCMA Song of the Year in 2012. They don't make them like that anymore. It was a really big win because they all played on it. You know, we sort of all did that together. So that was a big win for all of us that we could celebrate. And then, guys like Jamie Warren and Rick Hutt over at Cedar Tree Studios. There was a whole community there in Kitchener-Waterloo, and I sort of ran the roads around there, playing bars and clubs for 5 years, and finally got the, you know, work up the courage to make that move to Nashville. And the nudge that I needed was when our baby girl was born in 2006. She was only 2 months old, and I knew that I was literally spinning my wheels in Southern Ontario, making no money, just broke. And so we took maybe, I don't know what we had, maybe $2,500 or something like that. Put everything into storage and just went for it. Just moved here to Tennessee. And it wasn't, but a few months later, I got my first publishing deal. And, you know, I guess we both got a good deal. I don't know. I was pretty green, but it was a very humble publishing deal. And, but it was just enough for us to rent a little upstairs apartment from the sweet lady, Miss Tammy Brown. And she helped us, you know, get situated and felt like a little family for about a year living here, and got plugged into the community and wrote with a lot of great people. And here I am now. We're 15 years later this fall, and and it's been quite the journey. And really, snap of a finger, blink of an eye, like it just doesn't seem like that much time has gone by from then to now. I know it has. Yeah. But it's like when you're so busy and things are like, you work in album cycles and you work around like tour, like, you know, you got a tour next year to look forward to, or you know that you're going to be working on an album this year. And then by the time you record the album, then you go out there and you tour it and play summer festival dates. And then all of a sudden it's time to do the next record. And it's just like the years sort of go by in twos and threes, it seems.
Yeah. No, I think that's really like in-depth and interesting because, of course, you know, it's one of those places that when we've had acts on, like say Sons of Daughters, like Crystal Lee, Eric has mentioned it, Kelsey as well. Now I think they've moved since then. I don't keep up with them. I'm glad, like not in an offensive way, but I'm glad. I'm like, oh, I see that you just landed in Edmonton. They're like, oh, easy, like we just got here. Like they did mention, of course, like if you are big in country music or you want to make it in country, they always talk about like you have to go in the place where you can make connections. Like Crystal of Sons of Daughters said she was, I believe, in BC at the time. I believe that's where, like when we were doing the interview, but she's like, I can't wait to go back down Nashville. Mm-hmm. And like, you know, she was talking about her roommate and she's going to be on an upcoming episode as well. But at the time, I didn't know who she was, but you start to develop these relationships with these acts and then you start to kind of expand from that as well. So it's all about connections, and it's hard to make connections if you're not in the same place per se. Like, if it's almost like the equivalent because we're Canadians and it's hockey, but it's like if you want to make the Toronto Maple Leafs or Montreal Canadiens, as shitty as it's going to sound, they're not coming to Newfoundland. If you might be like, well, I want to play for my hometown team, great. But if you want to make Montreal or Toronto, they're not coming down to see you. Where if you said, okay, I want to make Montreal, I have to go play in Laval so they can at least come and see me. I want to play in Toronto, I got to go to at least maybe a Kingston or a Belleville or even the Toronto market, so that they can actually come and look at me play. So that's kind of what I took out of your answer. And I hope that's not like me going like, I'm off the loop, but that's kind of what it is. Like you have to go to these places, get entrenched into the market. And another big thing, of course, of being in Nashville as well is like when acts come to town, like bigger acts, you can almost like go see their shows. Maybe you know someone that knows them, and that can kind of form a relationship. Like I know the way that country music is today, it's like kind of like country pop. Like you have your Thomas Rhett's, your Florida Georgia Lines, but I still think in my own personal mind, and I hope a lot of generations kind of appreciate this, but like Rascal Flatts to me is timeless. I think like I can go way back and like I'm like that is kind of it's newish country. Like there are people that would listen to Garth Brooks and be like, no, Rascal Flatts is rock and roll compared to that. Like that's not. But then you listen to some of the newer stuff that they have out too, and it's like if it's yours if you want it. I think that was for I think it had the Chris Farley's brother in it and the music video. And I loved it, but anything they put out, I'm instantly like, I will give them the chance to listen to it. If I don't like it, fine. But they're always one of these bands that I'll come back to and be like,
oh yeah. Well, one of my real good friends has been their drummer and band leader for 20 years.
Oh really?
Jim Riley plays drums, and you know he's been with those guys literally from the beginning, from playing for Tips on Lower Broadway and the Fiddle and Steel and stuff. So he's ran the whole gamut with those guys. And now, you know, when you hear Dan and Shay, see, that's how we're talking about how generations, you know, influence other generations, right? Like people say, you know, like, oh, I bet you there's a young kid out there go like, oh, that band Rascal Flatts really sounds like Dan and Shay, where they have it completely backwards, right?
Well, it's like,
because, you know, it's like they paved the way for that. You know, that kind of sonic landscape of what they do, you know, and combined the best of some of those, you know, pop and classic rock and then big band sound, like a slick sound like Chicago and stuff, you know, power ballad into country in a way that nobody had before. And with Gary LeVox's amazing, you know, pop vocal, really pop country vocal, it's like he's like hillbilly Stevie Wonder or something. You know? It's like Stevie Wonder on cornbread or something. He's like he really sings like better than everybody else in terms of vocal chops. It just blows my mind every time I see those guys live. So yeah, man, you know, all part of my musical heroes. I mean, those guys have been around. I was still playing, you know, in my hometown band with my dad and my brother when their first single "Praying for Daylight" was out.
Oh, really?
So I hadn't even begun anything by the time those guys blew up and become superstars. So, you know, to say that they influenced me would be an understatement. Same thing with Keith Urban and Brad Paisley and those guys. Like I say, you know, I mentioned Vince Gill and all this stuff, but when I was playing in the bars in the early 2000s, like 2000 and 2001 to 2005, you know, that whole era. That was the heyday of, you know, that was Rascal Flatts, that was Keith Urban, that was Brad Paisley, and all of that stuff. So
now when you look back, it's like those are younger people now are saying, like my generation that is saying like, yeah, we had our Garth Brooks, but this is the people that we can kind of look and say like from start to finish, we seen them kind of up. Yeah, right. So it's interesting because when you're mentioning these acts, I think when you're saying like, oh, they sound like, it's like they sound like Rascal Flatts, or like, oh, don't the Rascal Flatts sound like Dan and Shay? It's almost like what's ever relevant now you compare to. Like I find myself in that trap where it's like you'll have some like MJ sounds like The Weeknd. I'm like, you mean The Weeknd sounds like MJ? But they're going
exactly.
Like Billie Eilish sounds like Avril Lavigne. It's like I love Billie Eilish, I love her thing, and then it's like, yeah, but Avril Lavigne had Skater Boy before Billie Eilish, and then they're just looking at you like, I didn't mean to. Like, okay, I pissed off Grandpa. It's like I'm not mad. I'm just saying it's the other way.
Yeah,
you know, like people will say Taylor Swift and Shania Twain. It's like some people get mad where it's like Taylor Swift should have stayed in country and then she went to pop. I'm like, okay, but in fairness, we had Shania Twain, and what it's like. Taylor is Shania in a way, but everyone has their own opinion on that. But I do think it's interesting because I find myself in that trap all the time where it's like you go back to a band and you'll be like, oh, they sound like this person. It's like, you mean that way around. I'm like, yeah, you're right.
Man, you mentioned Taylor Swift. I love that girl. I love Taylor Swift. I got mad respect for her. I just think she's just so great. But I think that what sustained her, like you can imagine the pop world how many people would love to knock her off the top spot, right?
Yeah,
It's such a competitive, and I bet you behind the scenes that I bet you it's like shrewd and probably nasty
yeah,
as all get out, right? Because they want their some other record label or manager or somebody else wants their person on the top spot,
exactly.
and they would if they could,
Yeah,
but they can't. They cannot knock her back because ultimately they don't know how to make the gold, man. And
yeah,
that young lady does. I mean, and I think it's because she started with the song. I mean, she started with her acoustic guitar
yeah.
and the craft of writing a great song that she still can do and deliver. And if you can, whenever you've got that, and also when she just has her pulse on, like, the consciousness and the heartbeat of the pop culture and people that are her age, she's growing with her
Yeah.
audience, and her audience is growing with her. So she doesn't, again, like what we were talking about with Mayer before, she doesn't have to feel like she's making, it makes perfect sense that she evolved, away from country music because she was making the music that she felt like she was connected to and the person that she was. Why limit herself when she's already speaking to this audience of people that are buying pop records?
Yeah.
She wants to continue to speak to them. And, and like she said herself, it's not to say she might not make another just total straight up country record one day.
Yeah.
And you just do what, when you're in a position like that where you're really driving the bus. I mean, she's driving the bus in her career. The record label, they just want to sit. The best thing they could do is just sit back and let the money roll in when somebody like Taylor does her art and just is left alone to do it. Because nobody can tell an artist like that what's best. They just have to do it.
Like, I do think it's interesting because I think I mentioned it on a few podcasts otherwise, and people are going to start thinking it's like the Taylor Swift podcast because the amount of times I say it. But it's like, I'm pretty blunt with people, and if I ever had her on, like, again, people grow. I know when she came out with Our Song and she was doing like Love Story, I was like, great. Like, in my mind, I was like, she's going to be like the next kind of Faith Hill if she stays in this lane, but she didn't want to. And I started, again, you grow up with it. I was like, oh, like, how dare she? She turned her back on country music because she wanted to go pop and gain more popularity. All the while, I still had these songs on my iPod, but I'm like fronting with people. I'd be like, oh, I hate Taylor Swift. I can't believe she's gone pop. But then you're like listening to some of it. But I like how she's gone full circle, and you can grow to appreciate acts in time, right? Like, I can say to you, there was a time frame there when a Taylor Swift song came out. I was like, this girl again writing about a breakup. I'm so tired of her blaming men. But at the same time, when you get older, you're like, well, gee, she's not the first one to do it. She's not the last one.
Oh, sure. And it's not
we've
so
had
obvious.
Alanis Morissette. Like,
yeah, and it's not so obvious how different it is today than back in the day when Dolly Parton was doing it with Islands in the Stream and having pop hits with 9 to 5 in a correlation with the movie and stuff like that back then. I mean, she heard all that stuff then too. How could you go to LA and turn your back on? It's like, you're not going to out country Dolly Parton.
Yeah. But it's funny because, like, even now listening to some, like, I haven't been kind of keeping up with her recently, but I remember she was doing a performance, and I think there's the line in the song where it's like, if I showed up at your party, would you have me or tell me? Basically, she sings the like friendly version of tell me to kind of go away or tell me to go F myself. And I'm like, great. Like, for me, I'm like, that's entertaining. Like, it's kind of country, but kind of pop. It's kind of like whatever you want it to be, like you were saying earlier, which is great. Yeah. I think it's like Cardigan, I think was the song. But
that's just it. When she's speaking the same language as the way people talk, and then that's always gonna win. All the greats have always done that. I mean, from Loretta Lynn. I mean, Loretta Lynn is probably the most successful female country artist of all time to this day, and she really paved the way. I mean, even though, like, to a lot of young people, I know I just looked her up actually recently. She's 89 years old this year. Sweet Loretta Lynn. But I mean, she was saying things that were just like, oh my gosh, you can't say that. But it was the way that young women were talking in her when she was coming up. So she just sung about it. And and then it resonated, and that's what Taylor does, and this, I think that's what Miranda does, and I think that's honestly what Billie Eilish does too.
Yeah.
And there's
Well,
a lot of
it's to the point where I like it in the terms of, and I'm like probably one of the biggest fanboys for Shania because it always comes back to me with Shania. But like you hear the song of like whose bed has your boots been under, or like Any Man of Mine, and it's like starting to like as you're younger you'll like it because you like the song, but like I'm sure there were people that were maybe in their 20s and 30s and be like, hold on now, how dare she tell a man what to blah blah blah. Or you could just listen to the song and let her be, like, because you've heard men sing about, like, you've seen men in videos or whatever, like kind of not being disminish of women, but kind of be like, you're my little darling. It's like maybe she doesn't want to be called a darling, just like, you know, Shania basically said, who's better, or Any Man in Mine, like, so you're a rocket science. That don't impress me about. Someone's like, well, it should, because you're out in the desert and no one's going to pick you up, so you should just take what you get. And it's like, or just let her sing. Just stop dissecting everything.
Well, it's from out of all of that, you know, I think the key is authenticity, and you know, and which is not always easy to do. I mean, people, you know, there's a lot of factors that go into, you know, to trying to keep up and have a hit song. You know, you're trying to keep up with sonic trends. You know, different chord progression trends and tempos and all of these things. But then at the end of the day, then you have to constantly remind yourself that you're really communicating with an audience, and you can't get too smart. You know, you can't try to outsmart them with something that's, you know, that they're not getting, or that's over their heads, and or just not the way that people say things. That's sometimes when I find myself mentoring new young writers or something like that. You know, folks are, I think it's kind of well, in my opinion, I think it's a bit of a trap to get hung up in, you know, really trying to say a weird title or something, like a really weird phrase or something, and maybe that's cool for people, but it's like, man, I'm not just always a fan of, like, just say it how you say it. Like, if you wouldn't talk like that, then don't sing like that, you know?
Yeah, it's like, don't try to make it rhyme or make it make sense. It's like, just whatever way you're going to say it. Like, I think it's kind of funny because in a world we live in now, it's like Sam Hunt, for example, gives a perfect example to me of like talking in a song. And I know Taylor does it as well, but it's like almost like there's a bunch of people that are like, why couldn't you just write a lyric for that to rhyme that? It's like, or he's just trying something different and he didn't find a lyric.
Really
so he's more or less saying, I am just going to say it the way I would say it.
Yeah, mad respect for him too. I think he's great, like seriously great. And I believe every word of what he's singing. Yeah. He's awesome. So, you know, and this one of those guys that came along and again, you know, changed the game and made things more acceptable to do. And you know, that was done years ago. Like when the thing that he was doing, they used to, you know, it was called recitation. You know, and George Strait did it. I think the last time, other than Sam Hunt, George Strait did it in a song called "Give It Away."
Yeah.
You know, she came fumbling through the house and blah 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 blah, and then he just sort of starts talking in the middle of the song, you know, and
it comes back. It just comes back to like I said earlier, like who's relevant at the time, and then you forget about it. Like, because I'm sure, I think it's like in The Thunder Rolls by Garth Brooks. It's like I think there's parts of that where it's not really so much singing as it is just talking and strumming the guitar. Like, I know it still sounds like singing, but like some people would argue, like, dude, like he's just kind of going like 3:30 in the morning. It's like, how's that singing? It's like, well, kind of, but yeah, he's kind of telling you the story.
Well, and Garth is the exception to the rule on a lot of his songs too. Like he makes me eat my words because he got away with a lot more poetry than I think some people will get away with today. I really don't think that the audience today necessarily has, or this generation has an ear for the poetry. I mean, he would really, like, you know, I will sail my vessel till the river runs dry, like a bird upon the wind. These waters are my sky. You know, it's like, sail my vessel till the river runs dry. Bird, what are you talking about? Yeah. You know, so it was really poetic. And same thing, like, city's looking like a ghost town on a moonless summer night. Very descriptive.
It's very metaphorical.
Like you're reading a novel. So, I mean, it totally can be done, and maybe somebody will do that again. But But that was a perfect combination of storytelling with poetry and imagery and stuff like that. We haven't had a lot of that. That seems to be, that's really kind of a thing that I'm sad to see sort of die off or go away in our genre. Maybe it's because of what I was saying, like maybe they think that the audience doesn't have an ear for that or something, but the storytelling like that, you know, where it's like, this is what happened to these other people, not me, but
But it's funny because when we actually had Tebe on and I mentioned it to him, and I come from an atmosphere or a background where it's like I shouldn't like belittle it as much, but it's like I like to learn while you're doing a podcast because I hate coming in knowing everything about someone, and then it's like, I know. But I said to Tebe, I was like, I remember listening to Tim McGraw, still love the guy to this day, but very blunt. You don't have to like everything that an artist does. But I was like, I remember Please Remember Me, like anything that he does with Faith Hill, the one about like My Next 30 Years, Live Like You're Dying. I love that one. But then I go from that, and then you turn on like say CMT, and it's like Truck, I'm like, what? Who's that for? Who's that for, Tim? And then Tebe was like, actually, it's funny that you like the other songs because one of my buddies teamed up and wrote that, and I was like, oh, well, tell your buddy that's good, but also tell your buddy to go back to Tim and tell him Druck, is not for me.
I'm happy for my friends that they made a buttload of money from Truck, and that's cool, you know. I guess that's just one of those things, like, you know, it ends up being in commercials, and it ends up being massive. It has a lot of utility for a song like that, and Tim is just, he's been no stranger to doing just some silly fun song too.
Exactly.
You know, but no, I'm with you. It's like, you know, how does that song sit beside you know, Live Like You Were Dying?
Exactly.
You know, it's hard, but I mean, gosh, who am I to say? Tim has made this massive career out of like being Truck guy, and then also Live Like You Were Dying and Humble and Fun guy, and get away with it.
Like two different age groups can like it. It's like I look at, for example, like a Kenny Chesney, where you're like the old stuff, and then there's like, you know, teaming up with like Uncle Cracker to write a song, and then like someone listens to something like recent, and you're like, not really for me. Or a perfect example, because I know we're kind of going way back, but you know, when you're saying you don't write the same as you did when you were 20, like I was just very surprised because I figured like Luke Bryan would be the type that every spring break you will see Luke Bryan, but I liked how at the very peak, not like at the end where people were not kind of showing up for him, but he's almost like, I'm done. This will be my last spring breakdown, like whatever. And there's an audience out there that's like screw you, man. Like you're still prime. We can still party. And he's like, I'm not that. I'm still gonna write good music for you, but I'm just past that point, which I like when you go out on top compared to, Luke, you got like 20 people here now. It's like, do you really want to do this anymore? It's like, yeah, man, I'm gonna keep doing it till I can. It's like, you can, but just look around, like feel the room. So I like they went out when he could.
Well, are you talking about the same Luke Bryan, Entertainer of the Year, Luke Bryan? I mean, he's still doing
Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm not saying like always on the downfall, but I just like a lot of acts would just keep doing a spring break until it could be like 20 years from now before he really goes on the downfall. But I just like, he came out and said to people like, I've had fun. This was great, but I feel like I'm not going to be giving you the best of me anymore at this because I'm not really into it of a spring break. Like we can still do similar things.
Yeah, you're talking about when you would do like his 6-pack, like spring break,
exactly,
and stuff like that. Yeah. Well, and his latest record's like probably leans more traditional country as, you know, a whole record than he's done in a minute.
Yeah.
Which is really cool because talk about country as cornbread. Like Luke Bryan is country as cornbread personally.
Yeah.
Like he literally grew up on a peanut farm in Georgia. Like he is the real deal.
He was born with a guitar in his hand and just coming out and being like, I'm ready to play country. They're like, hold on, can we just get you ready in school first, get you a little bit developed first? I was like, no, man. I'm ready.
He comes out ready to go, full of authenticity and stuff. So no, I mean it's great, man. I love that our genre like allows for all of that stuff because I love, you know, I've been a part of things that lean way more pop country. I would say I've got a song on the radio right now, top 20, I believe, Madeline Marlowe, a song called It Didn't. And I also was a co-writer on her last single, Neon Love. Both of them are total pop country songs with her incredibly cool, soulful voice.
Yeah.
But like they're super pop, shiny pop country songs, and the young girls like love them, and I love the way they sound too. I mean, because Madeline is just second to none as a talent. She's incredible. And then just this week, actually, as we speak, I'm proud to be a part of the Roadhammers' new single.
Okay.
It's called "Boys Are Back at It." Just found out today they got the #1 most added song across the nation.
Nice.
Which makes me super happy because it's my first time having a single with the Roadhammers, and that's straight up Southern rock country, like badass, and it's like could not be more opposite. And radio will play both of those things, and
well, I mean,
that's what I love about it. So there's room for all of it.
Yeah, and it gives you, like, I guess, a bit of dynamic too, like a feather in your kind of cap, because it's like if it's two different genres and you're a part of it, like not that you need it, but it kind of gives you validation for these acts that, oh my God, like I teamed up with this guy and it's successful. Like there are times that you could team up with someone and it doesn't pan out as great, but it's nothing personal. It's just kind of like, oh, I'm sad that didn't go this way, but it has to kind of give you somewhat of, I guess, a boost or like a positive of like, I teamed up with this guy. We did this. And if it continues that way, you're like, well, I can always go to Jason and we can do these things. Because like even looking at your
I definitely hope so. Cause I love that because I can't do all of them. And I actually really enjoy writing. I really truly enjoy writing with the ladies because, obviously I'm a male artist. I can't say the same things that they can say. They can say a whole list of other things that guys can't say. So it's super fun to write that. Like it's really, really is fun to help them write that and to kind of come up with different things, different melodies too. They sing in a higher register. But that's a lot of fun. And then on the Roadhammer stuff, the song is you should really check it out. The song is, I hope everybody tuning in right now checks it out. It's called "Boys Are Back at It," and it's super badass. And I got to have fun with it and write all these badass lyrics that probably nobody would believe from me. So, but these
is that Jason Blaine? I can't believe how far he's done. And then it's just like hey,
these long rockers, they'll they come with some authenticity with it. So it's badass. And then at the same time, I put out a new single this week called "When I See You," and it's really different for me. It's brand new. It's on Apple. It's on Spotify, and it just went out to radio this week. And we did a virtual radio tour, and it's different for me, but it's still me. But it's definitely probably leans a little bit more to the pop country side, maybe more so than I've ever done. And but it's still got great electric guitar riffs in it too. So I feel like we struck a good balance. So I hope everybody checks that out.
Well, yeah, like when we post the interview, we'll definitely put a link into it so people can definitely tune into it. I mean, Jason, I like the interview so far. I hope you did it too, because I know we kind of went all over the place, but I do enjoy going all over the place with access, especially when it's Canadian. I feel like, when you were saying about Bryan Adams saying don't label yourself as like a Canadian, like I kind of feel when we have Canadian acts on, and it's kind of labeling it in itself too, but in a nice way where I'm like, oh, well, we can go all over the place. For some acts, I'm kind of like, geez, if we don't focus on like the one career or the one thing, they're going to be like, man, like, why did we go all over the place? So I feel like Canadians are a little bit like, I don't care, like, whatever.
Yeah, whatever's fun and interesting. But man, thanks for having me on your show. I appreciate it, and I hope lots of people tune in. And I'll spread the word, man. I've enjoyed hanging with you. I'll spread the word.
That's going to do it for this episode of Tobin Tonight. Our thanks to Jason Blaine for coming on to the show. Remember, you can find past, present, and future episodes on TobinTonight.com, Spotify, and iTunes. Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and leave a comment or two. For Tobin and myself, this is Jacob saying thank you for listening and good night.